Hello everyone, this is Deborah at Diva Lady Designs and I'm so happy you're joining me today. Today I want to show you a super fun and inky technique using alcohol markers and vellum cardstock. This technique creates a beautiful modeled panel that can be used as a background or focal point. I'll also show you a great die cutting hack for working with intricate die cuts and even throw in a bonus card using an embossing folder. I had so much fun making this video. It's my most involved to date and it's full of card ideas, hacks, and tips. So let's get creating. For this technique, you'll need vellum cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. Some alcohol markers. I'm using Altenew artist markers, but any alcohol marker will work. Some alcohol in a spray bottle, and a Tim Holtz alcohol ink air blower. Begin by scribbling blocks of color onto the vellum cardstock. I chose to scribble in horizontal blocks, but you can scribble vertically, diagonally, whatever direction you want. Remember to choose colors next to each other on the color wheel. Otherwise, you're going to get a really lovely, muddy brown color. When you're done scribbling, spray the vellum with alcohol. Use as much or as little as you want. I got really inky and held up the vellum cardstock to let the colors blend. Then I used the Tim Holtz alcohol ink air blower to create some blotches on the vellum. Now I created a lot of these panels and discovered that the longer I left the alcohol wet on the vellum, the more the color tended to dissipate. And that's fine if you're going for a softer look, but I wanted a deep, vibrant color. So I carefully dried the vellum a bit with my heat tool, and that ended up giving me a much deeper color. Even though I used my heat tool, I set aside the panel to dry completely, and I'd give it a good some alcohol in a spray bottle. Challenges when using vellum on cards is how to adhere it to the cardstock without the glue or tape showing through. I found that using double-sided adhesive sheets solves this problem. I'm using a piece of Altenew double-sided adhesive sheet cut a little bit bigger than my vellum panel. This is a great double-sided adhesive product. It comes in thick 8 by 11 inch sheets and gives a smooth result every time. Lay the vellum down on the sheet a little at a time and smooth it out bit by bit. You can put it ink side up or down. I tried it both ways and found that ink side down worked best for my cards. I also used a plastic edged scraper to make sure all the bubbles and creases were smoothed out. If you get a crease in the vellum, don't worry. It just adds to the mottled look. Pretty cool, huh? Now let's use these panels with some die cutting. I'm using this new cover plate from Simon Says Stamp. It's called Flourishing Blooms, and it's from their new Stamptember release. I love the winding flowers and leaves in the plate. I'll use it to die cut both my vellum panel and a panel of Simon Says Stamp matte gold cardstock. I want to use my vellum panel as a background and use the gold cardstock for the flowers and leaves. But the vellum is kind of delicate once it's cut, and it won't lay well for the flowers to fit in the inlay. So I'm going to use the gold cardstock as a pattern for the vellum inlay. I'll run the die through my die cutting machine and then carefully remove the panels, leaving the dies in place. The Altenew double-sided adhesive sheet is nice and thick, so while the die will cut through the sheet and the vellum, it won't easily come apart, and we can use that to our advantage. And here's the hack. After cutting the gold cardstock, I begin applying glue to the flowers and leaves of the die, leaving the background portion free of glue. Then I'll place a piece of white cardstock on top and press it together securely. Now when I gently begin to peel away the unglued background, the flowers and leaves stay on the cardstock and leave me a perfect pattern in which to adhere the vellum die cut. Take your time with this part. The few extra seconds you spend on it will pay off big time. Now remove the adhesive back of the vellum bit by bit and lay it down on the white sections of the cardstock. This adhesive sheet doesn't permanently adhere immediately, so if you lay the vellum down incorrectly, you can carefully lift it up to reposition. Continue working down the die cut until the background is in place. And here's the finished panel. I love the shine of the gold against the soft, colorful vellum. To finish my card, I cut another panel of gold cardstock with the die and then cut out the flowers and leaves. I used the flowers to layer over 3 of the flowers on the card to give it a little dimension, and I put the leaves aside to use on my next card. For my sentiment, I used the Fancy Script Words hot foil and die set from PinkFresh Studio. The gold foil was perfect to pick up the gold of the flowers. I finished off my card with some red pearls from Studio Katya and then adhered the panel to a white 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card base. And here's the finished card. I love the contrast of the gold against the colorful vellum background. Now we're going to take the other die cut portion of the vellum and use it to make a second card. Since the vellum is light and airy and the flowers and leaves are so delicate, I'm going to cut another panel from Simon Says Stamp black glossy cardstock to create a background on which I can inlay the vellum die cut. Again, don't separate the layers of the die after cutting. Instead, apply glue to the background portion of the die cut and then adhere it to a piece of white cardstock. Then gently remove the flower and leaf portion of the black die cut. This will leave the perfect pattern in which to place our vellum. This part is a little tricky because the die cut is so delicate. I found that the easiest way to adhere the vellum is to begin with a larger section and to work outward from there. Look at this beautiful background. For my sentiment, I decided to use the Thanks stamp and die set from Honeybee Stamps. There's a stamp set and a die set with 3 different thanks dies. I used the smaller shadow die and the word die from this set. I cut 3 of the shadows from white cardstock, which I then layered together for dimension. I also cut 2 words from the same black glossy cardstock and layered them together, which I then adhered to my shadow base. I also wanted to stamp a smaller sentiment, so I chose one of the small sub-sentiments for everything. Using my Misty stamping tool, I stamped the words onto a piece of Neenah Solar White Classic Crest 80-pound cardstock using black VersaFine ink. Then I cut it into a small strip and cut 4 additional white strips to layer underneath. This gave a beautiful sub-sentiment for my card. I finished it off with some black enamel dots from Tailored Expressions. It's just amazing how you can achieve 2 such totally different looks from the same panel and die plate. Now remember I said earlier that I had made a lot of vellum panels? Well, I decided to use one of them to make a bonus card using an embossing folder. I used the Simon Says Stamp Leafy Green embossing folder. This was a freebie embossing folder over the Labor Day weekend. Always check your favorite crafting sites over a holiday. They'll run wonderful sales, and many times they offer gifts with purchase, as was the case at Simon Says Stamp. I adhered the vellum panel to a piece of Altenew double-sided adhesive and then placed it in the embossing folder, which I ran through my die-cut machine. The result is just stunning. Look at that gorgeous embossed image. To adhere the vellum panel, I placed a panel of white cardstock cut to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches into the corner of my score tool. This gave me a wonderful corner edge to use to place the vellum onto the cardstock. For my card, I cut a plain piece of vellum cardstock to 1 3/4 inches by 5 1/2 inches and placed it across the middle of the vellum panel. Then from my sentiment stash, I pulled this sentiment that I had prepared a few months ago. This is from Concord and 9th, Just Saying die cut set. I had already created the base, so I just needed to cut the actual sentiment from the gold cardstock and I was ready to go. I used the leaves that I had cut for my previous card and tucked them behind the sentiment. And there you have it, 3 beautiful cards using alcohol markers and vellum. I love the results that I got from this technique, and I'm sure there are many more that I haven't even discovered. Thanks so much for watching today. I hope you've enjoyed my video. If you have, please give me a thumbs up, and you can also subscribe to my channel. I've linked all products used in the description below, as well as putting a link to my blog post. You can also find me at Diva Lady Designs on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining me today at Diva Lady Designs.